last video we spoke about effect fields and power-ups. Today, however, we will satisfy my caveman Neanderthal male brain by making slides. The original Mega Jump only had straight slopes, so I want to make a system to get some variation. Everyone knows that caveman like when things go fast, boom boom. Could make a model of every slide in my game, but I wanted to make a dynamic system, and I've heard so much about spline meshes, so I wanted to try them out. I had no idea where to start really, so I opened up Blender and I created a slide segment with walls to keep the character inside as like a demo mesh of sorts. I had heard that it's quite important to have quite a few subdivisions on the mesh, so I added quite a few so I can handle rotations and stuff like that. Might have gone a bit overboard though. Once the mesh was created, I imported it into Unreal Engine 5 and made sure complex collision was used as the collision for the mesh, or I would have weird bugs when trying to use the slide where I would collide in thin air and stuff like that. Once the mesh was imported, I started creating a blueprint for the spline. I added a spline component and entered the construction script, which is a script that runs in the editor as you edit the spline. This is where most of the logic goes and where the creation of the mesh takes place. First of all, I need to figure out the total amount of spline points for the spline so I can add the mesh to them. I drag the spline component into the blueprint and get the number of splines from it. Since the minimum amount of spline points is 2, I subtract 2 from the result and pass it as the last index for the for loop. The loop is responsible for adding the mesh to each spline point and for enabling the ability for scaling and rotating of said points. The blueprint looks very messy and can be cleaned up quite a bit, but I'm a lazy person, so I won't be doing that. From the for loop block, I pull out the loop body and add the mesh component to the point. The important part now is to use the return value of this add spline mesh block for everything we want to do regarding the spline point. We'll dynamically interpolate between the two values. At the end of the blueprint, I enable collisions and we're done. We now have a working spline mesh that we can scale, rotate and expand as much as we want in real time. We now have a problem. If the slide angle is too shallow, we'll start walking and stop sliding, which is not something we want. My solution for this is to create a trigger box that sets the permissible walk angle to 0. Making any slanted surface into a slide. So I had to create a trigger box and set the permissible walk angle to 39 as my exit trigger for the character to reset the slant angle. For good measure, I also added an arrow component as the forward vector on the exit trigger, so I can set the rotation of Mr. Mega's collision box to allow for wall bounces after slides without needing to rely on the entry direction. This video was a bit longer than expected, but I believe it might have been a good insight into how easy spline meshes are to make in Unreal Engine 5. I also wanted to inform you that I have put out a demo of Mega Jump 2 on itch.io, where you can test out the current features of the game in the demo map you've seen in this devlog. The game is in very early state, but it gives some insight into how the mechanics will be once it's more polished. Thank you all for sticking with the series. I hope to see you in the next one. Please subscribe to stay updated on future devlogs. It helps out the channel a lot. I'm not really sure what the next devlog will be about, but stay tuned.